Down. Hi, and welcome to TL News Night. We're glad that you're here. I'm Nikki Robertson from James Clemens High School in Madison, Alabama, and I'm going to let the team introduce themselves. First off, I'll let you know Shannon Miller is not able to be with us this evening due to family obligations, and Alyssa Malaspino is actually at a school board meeting this evening for a very important cause where she is fighting to get some funding for librarians in the school district. Because right now, just like we've lived with in Alabama for the last 10 years and just finally came out of it, they have a zero budget, with which I know a lot of you can relate to. So Craig, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then we'll pass it off to everyone else and let everyone else introduce themselves quickly.
Okay, well, thanks. I'm Craig Seychelles. I think it says it right there. I'm out in Seattle, Washington, where we just dodged a storm and held our state conference. I'm an elementary K-5 teacher librarian in Washington State's most diverse school. And you just had a cool award too, Craig. Did you want to mention your award? Well, sure. I'll certainly thank Follett because they do a Teacher Librarian of the Year award with our annual conference, and somebody snuck it in there. So I have some money to spend on my kiddos. That's great because I'm constantly pouring books into the school, and thanks to Follett's award, I'm not paying for all of them this time. Awesome. Thank you. Jane?
Hi, I'm Jane Lofton. I'm a teacher librarian from California. I call myself now in the wild since I retired in June, but I'm not giving up at volunteering on behalf of school libraries and advocating for school libraries.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane.
And,
Jonathan? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to pass it on to Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. No. Is that good?
Yes.
I'm Jonathan. I'm a library and instructional technology specialist in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, right outside of Portland. And to celebrate our conversation with Alaska, I decided to wear my warm clothing. And since virtually everyone else here is in a warm climate, I thought I would celebrate the Maine-Alaska chilly connection.
I like it. And real quick before we move on to our guests that are here tonight, for those of you who have not tuned into the show before, we're just going to go over quickly a little screen share here, and hopefully you're seeing this. Holla if you're not. But tonight we're featuring Sheryl Wittig and our friends from Alaska, and we're going to be talking about some different issues going on and different things that are happening in Alaska libraries. If you would like to add to the conversation tonight, ask questions or anything else, please use the hashtag tlchat, and we will be monitoring Twitter for any of your questions or comments. And the reason that we do this show is because if you don't like the way media is depicting us as educators or as librarians, we need to tell our story. So we are. Be a TL Newsnight superstar, and that's all. We're going to come back. That was a quick and simple way to do that. And I'm so excited tonight because we have three really special guests with us tonight. First is Sheryl with the Alaska Association of School Librarians, correct?
Correct.
So Sheryl, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and who you teach.
Okay, I'm Sheryl Wittig. I'm at Auk Bay Elementary School here in Juneau, Alaska. It's in the southeast part of the state, the Panhandle, right along the Canadian border. I live about 3 miles from a glacier. We got 7 inches of snow this weekend, so we're on our way into winter. I was a teacher for 20 years before I became a school librarian 8 years ago, and I've been on our state board for, I think this is about my 6th year on the state board.
That's awesome. So you have a lot of great insight as to what's been going on there in Alaska with libraries and librarians. And then we are have an extra special treat tonight because we have Tiffany Whitehead and Joyce Valenza. So I'm going to let Tiffany introduce herself first, and then Joyce, and then we'll get started talking about Alaska.
Hi, everyone. I am Tiffany Whitehead. I am the middle and upper school librarian at Episcopal School of Baton Rouge. I've been a librarian here in Louisiana for quite some time, but this year I've moved into a new school, so it's been quite exciting, especially given the flooding that we had in the Baton Rouge area. But it's great to be here with you guys tonight.
And how are the schools doing there? Are there still schools with needs that we might need to be aware of?
Yeah, it's a challenge because dealing with the insurance and all of the different financial issues that come with dealing with the aftermath of the flood, there are many schools who are still displaced. I know that the school where I first served as a librarian, Tanglewood Elementary, they flooded, they lost everything in that school, and they won't be moving back into their facility until after Christmas. And so I know it's really long term, but I think once we hit the new year and people start getting settled back in their new schools, that's when we're really going to need to come together and support them once they're in a place where they're ready to kind of start moving forward.
So sending books and things like that really isn't what they need right now, once they get settled and back into their buildings and put that call out.
We still don't really have a place to put lots of things right now, but we're putting the pieces back together. So
awesome. Thank you for being here. And then Joyce Valenza, who I described to my new co-librarian today as being the godmother of all school librarians. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, I guess after about 40 years of joyful practice as a librarian, I joined the faculty at Rutgers University, where I am an assistant professor of teaching, and I help folks who are interested in becoming librarians become librarians. And I was one of the founding members of many of these online chat groups, including helping Nikki and the gang get TL Newsnight off the ground. So delighted to be here again, and I'm looking forward to hearing much more about Alaska. I visited once. I don't know if you were, yeah, that was so much fun.
I wasn't there yet, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to tonight. And then Tiffany and I have some information to share later, and I'm going to give you an update about the School Library Journal Summit that I just got back from yesterday, and so did Jane. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put Sheryl on the hot seat now and ask some questions. And I know you had talked about several things that you're wanting to maybe go over. And one of the first things we were discussing and looking at was the Alaska Battle of the Books. And we know that we have Battle of the Books with some other things, but maybe for new librarians who haven't been around and don't know anything about Battle of the Books, can you help us understand that and how that works in Alaska and maybe how it would relate in other states?
Sure. So our Battle of the Books, we like to think it's been around longer than everybody else's, but it's been going for about 33 years. It started in 1981, kind of spread through rural Alaska. The format is we pick, it used to be 15 books. Forever it was 15 books at a grade cluster. This past year, this is the first year we've dropped it down to 12 books just because of the budget crunch. So many schools were having a hard time procuring enough books and so forth. But the kids read the set books for their grade levels and form their own teams of 3. And then all of the questions start with the format of in which book did such and such happen. And then they've got 30 seconds to put their heads together and come up with an answer, write down a keyword from the title and a keyword and the author's last name. And then the time goes and they go around the room and they get to call out their answers. And then after everyone's given their answers, the correct answers revealed, and they get 5 points if they get the correct title and a bonus 3 points if they get the correct author. And then that all seems so lovely until you stop and think about, like, where did the books come from? Where did the questions come from? And that's where we do all the hard work. We have 52 school districts in our state. 46 of them typically participate. And that participation gives them access to the questions, the practice questions and the competition questions. And then it also qualifies, or one team, whoever wins the district championship advances to the state championship. And that's all via audio conference. GCI, one of the local phone companies across the state, gives us a cut rate on that. And actually there's also an IMLS grant that we get through the state of Alaska that helps support the librarians that are putting this together, because it does take, it takes quite a bit of work. So you've got people nominating books, and then you've got people writing 60 to 75 books per title. And then those go to this grade level chair, and then they're checked, the questions are checked and written and rewritten, and then they go on to a battle editor who checks them again, and then they go to the state chair who checks them again, and then they get all formatted and sent out. So it's quite the process. We do, the title selection happens for the most part, the meaty part of it happens at our state conference, which is usually, our state conference is the Alaska Library Association. We don't have our own conference, so we're part of that organization. So prior to that, there's people, there was nominations, and so somebody has to go through all these titles that are nominated and basically check for a couple things. One is, are 5,000 copies of the book available? And that's often, you know, a threshold. And typically we want it in paperback to make it affordable. So sometimes we have to wait a year or two for a great title to come up. And then at the conference, there's this 1 hour, sometimes an hour and a half, where literally we have 4 groups going all at the same time. And those of us who have got kids in 3 different groups are running back and forth, where they've got the nominated titles up. They've kind of narrowed it down at that point to titles that are available and grade appropriate. And you're basically, we're trying to use some titles that have been used before to save money. Some of the titles are below grade level. Some of them are above grade level. There's nonfiction in there, and there's an Alaskan title at least. And so we're trying to balance that. And it's always really fascinating to be there, because it's where you start realizing that the kids across the state, really, we've got some different demographics. So some people are going like, these are just too hard. My kids couldn't possibly read it. And then other people are like, oh, come on, you got to give me some meat here. You know, we can't attract and retain, you know, active readers if we don't have some meaty books. And then sometimes we'll get into controversial issues about, like, one of them this past year was Tough Boy and Sister, which was nominated to be one of the Alaskan titles. And it was like a tricky one. Like, do we want to use this title because it has natives and alcoholism, and is this like the only exposure kids are going to get? Is it a fair representation of, you know, the indigenous population and so forth? So some really good conversations and some negotiating and so forth. And we end up with a tentative list and a couple alternatives for each of the grade bands. And the grade bands are, we have kindergarten have 5, or now it's 4 because everything got cut back. 4. First grade have those 4 plus 4 more, and second grade has 4 more than that. And that, the K-1-2, is something that they do only within the school. It doesn't go off to a state level. But starting, there's a 3rd and 4th grade band, there's a 5th and 6th grade band, and then there's a middle school band, and a district can choose to have their 6th graders either be kind of in the 5, 6, or in the middle school. And then there's a high school band. And I think in the past, the high school had fewer books. So I think they've probably gone down too. They might be at 9. So that's the way it goes. And I'm trying to think of, yeah, so they qualify. It kind of is like January by the time we are running the building battles, and early February for the district, and not long after that for the state. And then it ends.
Sheryl, if I can just sort of butt in.
Yeah.
Alaska provides such a wonderful example of how necessity can help drive programming. because so many things you described are common to libraries all over the country, and the unique adaptations, such as, you know, the Skyped playoffs, or the, you know, the secondary battles between schools. You said 33 years ago your battle started, and about 33 years ago plus a few is when, you know, the radio schools and distance education was really taking off, first by bush plane, then by radio, then by, you know, telecommunications, and a lot of leadership in innovative adaptation comes from Alaska. That's why I was thrilled to come up to Fairbanks last winter, because you know, something that happens in the winter in Fairbanks is a breath of fresh air, absolutely. And I was thrilled to watch the Battle of the Book stuff. I was thrilled to watch how librarians adapt to their communities and serve their communities, where Seattle's going to do a Black Lives Matter effort this Thursday. In Alaska, you've got librarians, you know, adapting to home language and school language and curating materials. And there's so many examples. You just gave one in the Battle of the Books. So many examples of how you creatively adapt, how we're all the same, but we're significantly different too. And in those differences are the chances for innovation. It's really
Could I just
what
pause for a moment and say, holy cow, Sheryl, that is incredible. So I live in America's whitest state, where the only outlier is my governor, and the range of the diversity you deal with, plus the distance, plus the percentage participation. I have a friend, Tom Chaltre, I work with, who does this a lot. That's incredible. Huge, huge props to you for pulling something like that together. I'm spinning trying to imagine my little state trying to do something like that. We have a state-sponsored, statewide digital network. We have one-to-one technology nearly throughout the state, 7 through 12. And we can't pull off like a state conference. And you have 47 schools?
So, and about 25,000 students participating.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah. So it is, and you know what, before I became a librarian, I was a teacher in logging camps, very small logging camps. And that was the one sport that they had, because they couldn't field a basketball team sometimes, but they would have kids do battle, and sometimes the kid would be the only kid in that grade cluster, and they'd just do it on their own, and it was great. You could compete up in higher grade levels, but yeah. Fascinating. Big, at least when I was in rural Alaska, it was a really big deal to be on Battle of the Books and do well.
And to reiterate what Craig said, just the degree to which you have adapted to an environment that is so complex to support, and the gift you're giving those kids. I mean, the perspective taking and the opportunities that they have to connect. Yeah, libraries. Nice work.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, our Battle of the Books team, yeah, it is a whole core of, there's probably, I want to say 4 or 5 at the very, very top, and then all of these readers. There's a lot of people and a lot of man hours. I do need to say, though, it is also our biggest fundraiser for our organization, too, because, they do charge a fee to participate, and that all that money comes back to our organization. So it keeps us afloat.
So you mentioned too that with the Battle of the Books, you've had to cut back a little bit on the books because of budget. And I also noticed in our notes, the Spirit of Reading program, that's on hiatus right now due to funding cuts. Can you tell us, for those of us not familiar with the Spirit of Reading program, what that is, so that maybe we can get that word out and maybe some funding can get rerouted back into getting this, because it's so incredible what you're already doing with the Battle of the Books to bring such a vast state together. Like you were saying, you were in the logging communities where it's just teeny tiny, and so you've got all these tiny little specks that you're trying to bring together, and if that's the only sport they have, gosh, we really need to be supporting that.
Yeah. So Spirit of Reading was a great program, and we hope to have it come back. It was funded by an IMLS grant that did not get renewed. The small group that had put that together would pick an author, and last year we conveniently picked Matt Della Pena, before he got famous. And so we had him booked. So it involves two main parts. One is getting a lot of copies of his books, getting them out to the schools that he's going to go visit, and then basically running this author all over the state. Hopefully it also involves he or she showing up for the state conference, so the rest of us get a visit with him and all that good stuff. So books and authors, getting kids and books and authors together.
One thing I like too about formats like this is I know a lot of authors will either Skype in or do a Google Hangout with schools. And so that's another great way to bring some authors in there as well. But I hate that got cut because seeing them in person makes such a huge difference. I've seen Andy Plemons at his school in Georgia has had several authors in, and it just makes a huge difference to those kids. So I hope that funding gets back as well. I mentioned earlier, Alyssa's out trying to get funding for school libraries there in New Jersey, but also some funding that's been cut for me in Alabama, and I see the same thing is happening in Alaska is for professional development. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing. First off, the professional development a lot of us get in our schools is more generalized towards teachers, classroom teachers, and finding PD that's our people, librarians, is hard to find. And so maybe we can all talk about the type of professional development funding we're in, and maybe where you get the most bang for your buck, or recommended PDs, maybe for people who are just now getting into the library program. Maybe we're like you and we're in the classroom for 20 years and then moved into school library, and you're kind of like, okay, now where are my people? What conferences are there out there? Where do I need to go? Because when I first came into the library, I didn't know where I was supposed to go or where my people were or what I was supposed to be doing. So why don't you talk a little bit about the funding going on there and some of the conferences?
Okay. Well, since you mentioned the pre-service part, so our organization did some fundraising years ago that set up an endowment that pays for one $4,000 scholarship every year towards a certified teacher converting into a school librarian. So, and I was a recipient of that, and a lot of the teachers in Juneau, because they don't hire certified librarians to start with. But anyway, a lot of us have gone through that program and really benefited from it. The big one we have is we applied through the state for an IMLS grant for professional development, and it was financed. And basically, anyone can apply. They don't have to be a member of our organization, but anyone in a school library position can apply for funding. So it's about like $1,200 for in-state conference and $1,500 for out-of-state. And you're like, whoa, you could get in your car and drive, but you can't. And that's the problem in Alaska, is if we want to see each other face-to-face, it's just expensive and time-consuming. And it's a bit of a hassle to travel, but it's a wonderful opportunity. It's basically almost my only opportunity for really high quality face-to-face training. And we can apply to go to, the ones you'd expect, the State Library Conference, ALA, AASL, ISTE. You could go to the summit. Anything that was legitimate, YALSA or whatever. And those, we get about 20, depends on how the money works out, how many we're going to have out of state or in state. A couple dozen people every year get to participate in that, which is a big, it about meets the demand, because it's not just free money. For each day that you're off at the conference, you've got to produce an article or other kind of shareable something shareable that that will be part of our Puffin, which is our newsletter and so forth. So it gives us our content for our newsletter and keeps things fresh. And
that's what I loved about it. What I was reading in your notes is with that grant, there's that expectation attached to it. And then that helps you to get that newsletter written and get that information out to the rest of your tribe there that doesn't get to attend the conferences that aren't there. So I love that aspect of that is there, and you're getting the different voices to come back and share with everybody else what they learned at the conference.
it is great.
Now, this kind of leads into, with the Puffin, the newsletter and writing the articles, just like with the TL community, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later tonight, is finding how are we going to communicate with our members in each state. And I think that is a struggle every state has, is how do we get this information out? And so you mentioned, social media, websites, blogs, newsletter. And so where do you see this going? And do you have a solution that we can borrow? No,
I hope you have a solution for me. No, actually, we have a ad hoc committee meeting tomorrow to work on this, because, we realized that the model that we had, we're like, where did this come from? The model we had was a physical monthly newsletter in the days of old, and then it went to kind of an online, and now it's kind of lost its, well, what's the difference between the website and the Puffin? And so we're still trying to scratch our heads at that. And this is one of those ones that's also interesting when we have newer, younger board members. They're very much like ready to go social media and all that. And then a lot of the people who are actually volunteering sometimes are from the older school, where like I want to edit and I want to lay out a beautiful whatever. So we're trying to figure out and basically how to meet the needs, and we do not have the solution. So we're
working. I do.
Oh yeah.
So I forgot to mention earlier, trying to fill very large shoes from Tiffany, and then from Donna McDonald, and then Sheryl Gick. I'm now the ISTE Librarians Network President. And one of the things we're really talking about is you describe Alaska School Library Association and your state library association are married, for lack of a better word. And yet I can imagine there are certainly wonderful aspects of it, and probably some issues that arise that make it very complex. And then as we look at our 50 states, there are very few instances. New Jersey is the one I know best because of Alyssa, who's the president-elect, where the ISTE affiliate, in my case ACTM, which is means, and the library have anything to do with one another. And for me, it's so maddening that there's not more of that conversation going on. And as Joyce and Tiffany will talk about in a little bit, one of the ways we're hoping to, one of my goals for this coming year is really just to figure out who those people are and start to capitalize on social media and capitalize on the existing structures to get those conversations going, whether it's with, so I'm extremely fortunate, there's 2 librarians in my school. I have an embarrassment of riches, and my co-librarian is the Maine Association of School Libraries president. So we're gonna start with me, and we managed this year to get a library thread into the state ISTE conference. And then I got to present and talk about telling my library story. Big old quote from you, Nikki, big old slide up there. But the ways in which we have existing structures that we could sort of massage or maximize the capacity of, I find like in the bureaucracies of those 3 things, the state library networks, the state school library networks, and then the ISTE affiliates, there are people who are trying to spread themselves so thin that I'm hoping we can begin to merge those. And you don't have the luxury of going to all those different ones, but in Maine, they're an hour away from each other. And usually there's open roads. So the capacity to sort of take advantage of that, even if it's just to show up and be like, hello, ISTE affiliates, I'm a librarian. Or hello, librarians, I'm an ISTE affiliate. Seems like a great starting point. And I know that New Jersey has had an easier time because of the existing marriage between their school library association and their ISTE affiliate. but that's very rare. And so we're going to have to sort of forge those connections where I don't think they exist.
Oh, I want to look into that New Jersey thing. That's interesting. Yeah, our state ed tech conference is excellent. It's probably the best conference in our state. It's ASTI, and they do a wonderful job. And I think there are a lot of school librarians who actually prefer to go to ASTI rather than our librarian conference.
And I've seen a lot of library conferences trying to butt back to back with their state tech conference. I know in Alabama we've tried to do that so that it's all right there together, because people were choosing to go to one or the other. And so I believe, and Jonathan, I think that's a great idea. We need to start merging those two, because we're not separate as librarians from the technology. That we should be an integral part of that, and are an integral part of it, and we're not going to be seen as that if our conferences are kept separate. So that's something we can definitely work on. And then one more thing, Sheryl, I wanted to talk to you about, the awards that you mentioned. People don't qualify for the Alaska School Librarian Award because you were saying, you know, in those tiny little schools, you might not have enough students to have a librarian, but you still have somebody who's working in that same type of role, whether it's a library assistant, classified person. So can you tell us about the awards that you're hoping to do and to recognize those people?
Yeah, so last year was the first year that we started an additional award, and it's basically for all those people working in school libraries that don't have an endorsement in school librarians. Either they're not certified or they're not working in that capacity, and so they have to, yeah. So and it's great. We gave out the first ones last year because for several years you'd have people apply, principals would nominate them, and you quietly, like, they don't even qualify. And they would write these glowing things, and they were doing some real bang up jobs, and we didn't have a way of recognizing them. And it's that you want to advocate for the highest level of professionalism, which would be an endorsed school librarian. But the reality is that in some really, really rural places, that's not going to happen. Either, you know, they've got 12 kids in the school, and I mean, I've been taught in schools like that, and they might have a district library, and I only know of like maybe 3 districts that have a librarian that kind of floats around for the whole school district. But a lot of those people are out there on their own, and they need support. So we added that award, and that also reminds me of that every year or two, there's also kind of an academy in the summertime. It's traditionally, it has been for people who are endorsed librarians, and it's awesome, paid for mostly by the state. We had who just came up here, seen her face, who can't make it here tonight, who's got the biggest smile, come on, who is Shannon? Okay, so Shannon was here a couple of years ago, and spent a few days with us, and we had awesome people. This past year, the focus was on paraprofessionals, and so they had one at Fairbanks just to bring in those people from rural Alaska and other places so that they could get appropriate training. And that one was interesting because it was actually a joint between public libraries and school libraries. But we're hoping to have our regular leadership academy in a few years, which is nice because it's one of the few places where we can actually get our recency credits in something that has to do with library. So,
yeah, that's important to have all that. Thank you for doing that, because, you know, I think sometimes our aides, our assistants, and get overlooked often, and boy, without them, we couldn't do what we do. And so we really need to recognize them as much as possible. So now let's talk about those all-important conferences, because I'll never forget my first time going to a conference, a larger conference outside of my own state, and just being overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, there's people just like me here. You know, and so sometimes I think you really need to go and be among your people. And I get so rejuvenated when I go to a conference. I feel like, oh yes, I can keep doing this on those days where I feel like I just can't take one more step. I can't wake up and go to work one more day. It rejuvenates you to be around your people. And I know that Joyce and Jane just came back from the school library summit. So I'm going to let them talk a little bit about that and what they learned while they were there. It looked like fun on Facebook anyway.
Yeah, well, we had a great time, didn't we, Jane?
It was wonderful. Yeah, yeah, definitely a lot of fun, but also very, very, very worthwhile. Lots and lots of wonderful ideas and information and collaborating and networking. And
yeah, the authors were especially brilliant. It was such a delight to meet John Lewis and to see Andrew Aiden's, we all got copies of the March trilogy, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the house when John Lewis told his story. And then we also got copies of We Are the Ants, and Sean David Hutchinson told a sad story about his early years and how important books were to him. And how important it was, and I know we've had conversations about this before, but teens who are different need to find themselves on our shelves somehow, and we need to figure out ways to make those books pop out so they can discover them, and if they want to take them out quietly in paper bags or however they want to access them, it's our mission to do this because no one else is doing this for these kids. That stuff has to be findable in catalogs and displayed in ways that are not above the kids' heads. I mean, literally, that's one of the things he said. And libraries saved this young man's life. And so, we think about these things as jobs sometimes, or other people think about them that way. But coming back from a conference like this, you realize that it isn't just a job. It's a mission. It's a calling to so many of us. And when you hear these stories, you recognize, oh yes, we put up with all sorts of stuff, but there's there's an example of a shelf who's posting.
So that was mine in my library when I came in, and to see. So I'm an advisor to the civil rights team. To see my students in this narrow band sandwiched between selling overseas sex, divorce. I said to my teen pregnancy, like, what more of a message of A, we have no place for you on the shelf, and B, you're a social problem. I couldn't even begin to believe.
You're talking about that Dewey number, right?
It's so horrifying when you don't think about something more complex and how someone sees themselves reflected on your shelf.
That's really interesting. It's so obvious. Wow. Well, that was one thing that happened. We also ran a different kind of hackathon this time. And one of the goals in the hackathon, this connected to fundraising as well. One of the goals was really understanding how to translate the language we're using into the language of ESSA. And when you are trying to get a seat at the table, some words that you might want to use are the words of the ESSA legislation. We want to talk in terms of well-rounded education. We want to talk in terms of equity, in terms of personalized, rigorous learning experiences supported by technology, about student support and academic enrichment. We want to talk about the AIL, and I'm blanking out, it's literacy experiences. Yes, it is. Innovative approaches to literacy. All of these are the categories in which funding is going to happen. And when we're not talking about book bake sale kinds of money, when we're talking about big money, this language is critical to making sure that we're written into any grants that are happening at the district or school or even state level. And so it's time to start really going to the statewide workshops that AASL is presenting, and to figure out how to get there. But it doesn't hurt to begin to use that language. And then, is it okay to go on, or you want me to be quiet for a while?
This language too, the Future Ready Librarians, is similarly powerful.
You're right, and it's funny because I think what we're faced with, Craig, and this has been something I've been talking about being part of the Future Ready team as well. We've got to have our new standards coming out in November. The new standards are looking at a lot of different things. Future Ready has a different language. That's going to be meaningful to any administrators who have signed up to be Future Ready schools. That will connect us to program and make us critical players within Future Ready schools. So there's a lot to think about in terms of how we integrate, and maybe we need charts and scorecards. I don't really know, but I find myself, when I'm talking to some people, talking one language and talking another language when I'm talking to others. But our language doesn't seem to be getting us in the door in a lot of places, even though it means the same thing as what everybody else is saying.
If I can just pull that page off of Mark Ray's, because Mark was at our Hack Wilma conference, right, talking Future Ready. And again, it's what keeps the administrators up at night. That's the language we speak. And when Sheryl was talking about professional development opportunities, that's in ESSA. We need to go out and claim that money. It's explicitly available to teacher librarian professional development in those big, this is not bake sale money. And so we've got to be there at the hearings. Yeah, so it was very exciting. You know, the other person who was with us was Mr. Hack Hargaden. Keynote, and again, how do we get the language of the people who aren't with us to include? And I heard Sheryl talk about, you know, the people that are doing effective programs. Let's give more attention and recognition to the paraprofessional staff that are there in every way. You don't want to tell a district you don't have something. You want to tell them what you've got is ready to move you forward in a big way when you recognize, and especially in this ESSA opportunity time. Make sure that our state hears it. Go ahead, John.
I'm sorry. When we go back to the options for PD, I know Alaska is a tough one for this, but really inexpensively, just visiting your neighbors who have successful programs. We did a Library and Learning Commons renovation, and the amount of money we saved by doing 3 or 4 visits to surrounding learning commons. I mean, obviously we made some mistakes, but so many fewer as a result of those. And that's a really simple connection, you know, and then later on you can Skype into their spaces and you know what you're talking about. But those visits for me were just transformative. Like Nikki describes finding your tribe, you also find sort of your PLC, I guess, you know, the people that are surrounding you with great programming that you can celebrate, but also build your programs on the back of the best aspects of theirs.
Jonathan, that reminds me of 2 things. First of all, just seeing Stoney Evans, he gave my students a tour of his library this week, just with his laptop, walking around with Caitlin, his co-librarian, and then seeing a lesson that he did when he won this award in Arkansas, and actually they filmed, you know, parts of the lesson, the highlights of it. And it was delightful to kind of see that and to see, oh, well, he did that with this book. I can do that with this book. And yeah. And also next week, we're having our first New Jersey bus tour. And so we're setting up examples of exemplary programs. There's no buses, but the libraries have opened up their spaces during a particular time during the course of a week, kind of like a garden tour in a place where there'd be gardens, like an old house tour. And so we've got a schedule, we've got descriptions, we've got maps, and my students and our alums and some other people from AkASL, if they want, can visit all these libraries in an open house setting during the week. So yeah, we're trying, that is so eye-opening. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Hey, Sheryl, you're going to get a dog sled team together and do tours of different libraries? I will say though, some of the best professional learning I've done is when me and my co-librarian, Gabriella DuBose, we would take a day off and go visit other libraries in our state and see what they were doing. And that was a great learning opportunity. So I love that y'all are mentioning this.
You know what's really, Nikki, what I think that because my focus right now is pre-service people, I have librarians who tell me they want to be an elementary librarian, and I know that they want to be a high school librarian. They just don't know it yet. They don't. I don't know why I know this, but I can pin them. But you don't know because it's like the blind man and the elephant. You're only seeing the tail. You have not seen the trunk yet. And if that's your experience, you may not realize how vast and different public schools are from private schools, and urban schools are from suburban or rural schools, and big schools are from small schools and you don't know. You may have seen one program growing up, and my students see one field experience, and it was freaking me out that they had such a narrow lens on our practice. So yeah, we need to figure out how to systematize that as well, and figure out how to roll programs like this out. So we have a lot of work to do. But I just did want to mention that at the summit, we really had a great hackathon, and we came up, I'm hoping to do a blog post about the details, but we talked about the importance of crowdsourcing. We're still doing a really crappy job at sharing all the stuff we're inventing over and over again, at listening to student voice, and when we have to do advocacy, let the students do it. And also, we are not carefully planning for OER and the bounty that's coming down the road. And then also not getting into complete OER frenzy, because we've invested in a lot of materials. And one of the things I worry as we roll out federal OER initiatives is that how will this stuff live nicely with the databases we've purchased, the books we've purchased, the ebooks we purchased? Because just because it's not free doesn't mean it's not good and we can't scale it. So these are things that we were thinking about. And then we shouldn't probably, are we doing okay on time, Nikki?
Yeah, I think this is where we need to bring Tiffany in, because we've had the conversation tonight with Sheryl, and Jonathan also mentioned about how to best bring to our communities what they need, whether we're talking about just within our district, within our state, or nationally as our country. And Jane has something to say real quick, and then we're going to pass it over to Tiffany, because it goes right along this train of thought. Jane?
I just wanted to share really quickly. Joyce really did a great job of summarizing the summit, but I did just want to circle back for a moment to John Lewis that she started with, because he was just so powerful. And one of the things that he said that I think deals with politics and also with, all the things that we need to deal with as school librarians is, he said, when you see injustice, you have to find a way to get in the way, change, to correct that. And we were so fortunate to hear him. And I think with all the wonderful things I took away from there, that was one of the things that resonated the most. And as I said, it applies to all the things going on in our political world and in what we owe to our students as school librarians.
I agree. Excellent. I mean, I was so jealous that y'all got to be there with him. Oh, Tiffany. So we have Tiffany on tonight and Joyce to finish up the show tonight. We have about 10 minutes left talking about restructuring, and a restructuring that is coming to the TL community. So yeah. I'm going to pass it to you.
All right. So we have some joint blog posts that are going to go up soon, but we wanted to announce tonight that we are going to take some time and kind of reevaluate our TL Virtual Cafe tlchat and TL News Night lineup. We are so proud of everything that we have been able to offer to our tribe for many, many years. I mean, the TL Virtual Cafe webinar series started 7 years ago, which is really crazy when you think about it. And back when we started, there was really nothing. Like, we were on the cutting edge, and Joyce and Gwyneth really, I mean, started something great for us. And all of those that were involved in the first couple of years, and then those of us who kind of got picked up along the way, we've been able to offer really great professional development that is relevant to school librarians. And for quite some time, we were kind of what was out there. And I know for me that this is where I found my people. It all started with the TL Cafe webinars. And for me, that's how I got involved, because it was such a great opportunity. And for me, it was filling a void of being the only school librarian teaching that age level in my district. This allowed me to make those connections. But with that said, we've come a long way, and we are now at a point where there's so much amazing professional development out there, and we feel like it's time to kind of take a step back and think about what is next, and how we can best continue to serve our tlchat tribe, but how we can kind of refocus our efforts. I will say over the past couple of years, there's been a bit of decline in our participation, and it's not because we're not offering great things. It's just because there's so much out there. And with 3 nights a month, I know that we've kind of spread ourselves a little bit thin. And so it's time for us to kind of take a step back and think about where we should go from here. And so tonight we are announcing that we're going to take a little hiatus. The tlchat, the TL webinar series, and TL News Night will be on pause for November and December, and we're going to take some time to reflect. It's time for us to really think about what's next and where we want to go from here. So we are putting up blog posts that have surveys where, if you are interested in getting involved, please go and fill that out. Give us your information. Let us know how you would like to be involved. But our plan at this point is to restructure into some new Phoenix form, where we will be going back to 1 night a month. So we will return in January, the first Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, just like always. But we're going to take on a new form, and we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from everyone. We want to know what we should do moving forward to bring our community together, to offer great learning experiences, to offer opportunities to connect. And I'm really excited to see how we transform and how we go from here.
Great, and I do want to mention that Tiffany and this gang here and the few people who couldn't make it tonight have been exerting Yemen's efforts, really moving our profession forward. This has been a grassroots effort. Nobody gets paid for any of this. And honestly, I'm such awe of the work you've put into this creative space. I think it's been a model to many other communities. Nobody told us to start this. Everybody played a role in making it even more fabulous. And the thing is archived. And I don't think one of the things you realize is that I'm using all of the archive with my students. And so you've become a space. And if anybody ever asks me, how do I play with data? Well, I'm going to go back and get Jennifer Lagarde's video from the archive. So this stuff is all searchable and reusable. And so it's been a major contribution beyond the moment of its production and existence. It continues to resonate with everyone. The other thing I want to add to what Tiffany says is I go to lots of conferences, as I think you all do, and what I see are the people who were you 10 years ago who come up to me and say, how do I get involved? And I'll suggest to them that they volunteer to host, but they don't think they're there yet. And I think one of the things we have to do is tell them, hey, wait a minute, you're as there as anybody else. Just volunteer to be a leader of this. And so as we reimagine this, we're hoping also that people whose names we don't yet know will become the leaders of the next imagination of this. And so when you see them at conferences, don't let them walk away from that greeting that you make with them. Have them actually make a commitment to being there that first Monday in January, or to fill out the survey that Tiffany did. We've got to make sure that they take action, not just walk away thinking, oh, gee, that's nice that she said that or he said that, but really act. So what's everybody's thoughts on this? I'm excited about this reimagining.
I'm excited about it and nervous too. I know that for me, when I got involved, it was getting a call from Gwyneth Jones, and I'm not a person who answers my cell phone if I don't know the number calling me, but I was on my way out the door. I'll never forget the day it happened because that's how much it stayed with me. But I was on my way out the door and the phone rang. It wasn't a number I knew, and I answered it though, which I never do. And I was like, hello. And she's like, oh, is this Nikki Roberts? And I was like, yes. She goes, this is Gwyneth Jones. And this was my reaction. And I'll never forget that. But she reached out to me and said, we'd like for you to come on TL Virtual Cafe and do a presentation. And up until that time, I didn't think that, I didn't have belief in my own abilities to do that. So I'll never forget that. I'm so grateful to her for reaching out to me. But I think we underestimate our own abilities a lot of times. And we're like, we can't be this person or that person, but you are. And all it takes is you stepping up and showing and sharing all the amazing things that you're doing in your library with the rest of us. So there's my story. I'm sorry I'm crying.
Yeah. Well, it is absolutely true, Nikki. You know, and it was the lead-in tonight, right? That we are the media, that we are the experts, we're the people that we're waiting for, and that's really well put, Nikki and Joyce. That was a tissue here, because we all need to keep them handy, because this is work of the heart. The other person who was at our conference was John Shu, and talk about teaching from the heart. And this work matters. It matters in the lives of the kids that we're with, but lo and behold, it matters to other librarians in our communities, our states, and across boundaries. So I really do look forward to people using this as a chance to hack the tlchat format and grab the good parts, reimagine it, bring in some fresh ideas and fresh people. So it is exciting, and I'm looking forward to the new year.
I think also, I mean, for a less hardy kind of approach to this, you're also creating a brand for yourself as a leader and a contributor. And I think that as a result of your participation here, you get opportunities. People notice you, and you get asked to speak at conferences. You get asked to write about what you're talking about. So it is an opportunity, personal opportunity, as well as a contribution.
All right, we have about 2 minutes left. So I think in closing, all of us, or some of us, I think a whole bunch of us, are going to be cross-posting the same announcement that Tiffany made here tonight. Make sure to look for that, because in that cross-posting, you will find a link to a Google form where you, our community, our people, our tribe, get to decide what this is going to look like when we come back in January, because we want to meet your needs. We know some of you love the Twitter chats. There's the tribe. Some of you love the Twitter chat. Some of you love the webinar format. Some of you love this format where it's more of a freestyle talk format. Or you might have a completely different idea in mind that you've been saying, why don't they do that? Well, because we haven't thought of it yet, and that's why we need you. So please look for those cross postings. We'll also put it on the TL Wiki. I believe we're looking at doing a website and that will connect back to the wiki so we don't lose any of those great resources. I think Jane has volunteered to head that up, if I am not misunderstanding, but Jane can't do it all alone. So she will need people to help with that, and we need you. We need our community. We need our tribe to come together so that we can keep providing this grassroots effort. Like Joyce said, we're coming together as librarians to provide great professional development for other librarians. Nobody's making us do this. It's not part of a organization or anything like that. It's all of us coming together, and hopefully Jonathan is going to bring in the ISTE part and just kind of merging all of that together into one. So any final words, and then we'll sign off.
I'll jump in for 1 second to say, this is what I've become infamous for saying, which is, I used to think I was crazy, but once I found tlchat and ISTE Librarians Network, I realized I was just trapped in the wrong asylum. And like you, Sheryl, I had been an English teacher, and I was beginning to see the role of technology and the power of a 21st century library. And once I saw that, I really just took off in a way that I had never imagined was possible. And for me, the moment I remember is being at the ISTE conference and having my first conversations with these people. And then Nikki, you said, tell your story. And I was exactly that person. I'm like, I'm new to this. I don't know what I'm doing. And what I said about, visiting other people, invite them. Who cares what situation you're in right now? Because you're crowdsourcing locally and saying, hey, what can you help me out with? What can we do to change and improve this? And I think at ISTE, certainly we would love to see some new voices, and like Joyce mentioned, students and people who are coming into this with a completely fresh perspective, because that's what we need. We need to keep evolving to stay relevant.
And blending these, like ISTE with the rest of it so that it's not seen as separate. So I love that we're going to be able to think about this over the next couple of months and come back with a blend and a meld of all of us together into one show. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tiffany, Joyce, Sheryl. Thank you so much for sharing about the Alaska libraries, because that's definitely a unique situation with like 12 students in one school and what to do with that. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back in January, and who knows what it's going to look like, but it's going to look the way that you all suggest. And thank you. Good night.